Welcome to Direct Supply's Continuing Education webinar series. Direct Supply offers monthly webinars on a variety of topics throughout the year. The topic for today is health literacy for successful transitions to home. My name is Robin Malik, and I will be facilitating today's meeting. Please note the information contained in this presentation is intended to provide general information but not advice about certain regulations and initiatives. This is not intended as legal or other advice, and each situation may vary depending on the particular facts and circumstances. You should not act upon this information without first consulting with qualified legal counsel. Today's webinar will be presented by Dr. Sylvia Aruffo. Dr. Aruffo is the founder of Communication Science, Inc., a behavioral research and communication design company. The company specializes in solving communication problems from the end user's point of view. Dr. Aruffo has served on the Advisory Task Force for URAC accreditation, the International Disease Management Association, and the Case Management Leadership Council. Her publications on patient adherence have appeared regularly in healthcare journals, and her programs have been recommended by the American Medical Association and Pharmaceutical Manufacturers Association. Dr. Aruffo has a doctorate in ethnolinguistics from Northwestern University. She speaks 5 foreign languages and holds a certificate in African political economy. Dr. Aruffo also has an MBA from Northwestern. She was a VP of Sales for American Hospital Supply and a Director of Technology for Baxter Healthcare. A passionate advocate of the Duran quality cycle, she served as a Quality Award Examiner at Baxter. And now, please welcome Dr. Sylvia Aruffo.
Beginning is health literacy, and when I was working with the World Health Organization on this precise problem, it was before there was such term as health literacy, and I'd like to share with you some insights that I think allow us to take a step back and what we really want to do with our health literacy focus. And that I'm going to call make the materials work as hard as you do. The London School of Economics would like us to think about any task at all as a combination of labor and material. Every human activity, they say, has 2 inputs, and productivity is how well you've maximized each of those inputs separately and together. But there is a tendency to overemphasize labor. And I think any of you listening know how true that is. To prevent readmission, the whole healthcare industry has placed these massive demands on you, on labor, with virtually no attention to how much of that goal can be accomplished through materials. To prevent readmission, patients must become autonomous. And if we want productivity in our efforts to make them that way, lighten our burden, the materials must have enough effectiveness to achieve that patient autonomy by themselves. If you just hand them the materials, a goodly portion of them will accomplish becoming autonomous by themselves. So in order to do that, we're going to do 2 things. We're first of all, going to refocus health literacy from comprehension to inspiration. And in order to do that, we're going to build our patient education for that productivity, that is, to work separately. That means we're going to do 3 things before you even put your pen to paper to write a handout. Listen for different content that you might expect. Design what you write for discovery learning, and organize the material that you have to communicate by goals and not topics. Then there'll be 6 more things to do as you actually begin to write, and then 1 thing after you write. Now, is it really possible for materials to work separately? I love this little cartoon. I have something for you, Earl. Oh, I've made a list of ways that you could improve yourself. Now, don't get defensive. I'm just trying to make you be happy. Walk, walk, flush. How about that? It did make me happy. That, I think, is what happens to a great deal of our patient handouts. And I think it's partly because health literacy, too often the people who concentrate and emphasize health literacy are focused on details rather than the big picture. And here's an example. If you go to the CDC and NIH websites and find their toolkit for health literacy, making written material clear and effective, you will find it divided into chapters. I took one example of chapter 6. You see, make the type size large enough, emphasize words with boldface, not underline, use a dark-colored text. They have on this website over 200 rules. I'm afraid I have the reaction of physician heal thyself as far as being simple and clear. These health literacy specialize in comprehension. You can tell that each one of these points is to enhance the patient's comprehension. However, the end goal of patient education is not merely comprehension, but behavior change. Comprehension by itself is not going to achieve that. One of my favorite stories happened out in Los Angeles, where administrators at Cedars-Sinai were trying a variety of methods to increase doctors washing their hands. I think we can all agree that the doctors knew the fact, they comprehended the fact, and one I'd like you to ponder weeks from now is it would have done absolutely no good to have them do a return demonstration. What the task force did was to have each doctor press the palm into a Petri dish. Then, after letting it incubate a while, they posted the results as screensavers on the computers all over the hospital, and hand-washing compliance shot up to nearly 100%. That's inspiration, and that's making materials work by themselves. The goal is not merely to comprehend, but to inspire behavior change. So how do we do that? Because if we don't create content to inspire, the editing for comprehension, like recommended at the CDC and NIH, really isn't worth much. So the first thing we're going to do is listen to the patient. Now here's an example of a frequently asked questions screen on a website. And frequently asked questions makes it seem like the professionals are listening. However, if you look at the answer to 4 out of the 6 questions, it's your doctor will tell you, your doctor will tell you. This is very discouraging to autonomy. It makes a person feel dependent. Is this really what they are doing to listen to what the patients want? If you look at the second question, they actually say, how can I help my family adjust to living with someone with heart disease? Here is a clue that this is not a genuine, frequently asked question, because no patient would ever ask such a question. They don't want to be a father to their family. They don't want to force their family, except some very unusual ones, don't want to be a burden on their family. What, in fact, is happening here is that the hospital is creating an ad that they've embedded in their frequently asked questions. It's not a frequently asked question at all. They merely want to recruit people for a seminar, a support group that they've created. This is a betrayal of listening to the patient. That last frequently asked questions was supposedly about cabbage patients. We had a team of people fan out across the country and spend time as a fly on the wall with over 300 cabbage patients, listening to what was disturbing them. What we found were the 6 genuine frequently asked questions. These are the things that were bothering the patients and they didn't, for the most part, they didn't even know how to ask them. We put this handout together. We gave it to the hospital that had commissioned it, and they were actually able to reduce the number of personnel in their call center because we had already answered the questions. The next thing to do, once you have discovered the content that people really do want to hear, then you need to design it for discovery learning. And that, you've probably heard that term, but we haven't seemed to adopt it in healthcare. Here is a typical blood sugar diary. Someone has filled it out with their information for 3 days. However, in order to understand it, what they've been told is to take it to their doctor, and their doctor will tell them. This is not autonomy, this is dependence. There is a field called manufacturing quality control, which can show us how to make a patient handout work for discovery learning. What you're seeing here is exactly the same information as was on the Becton-Dickinson patient log, but now it's been laid out so that the patient can see at a glance where their blood sugar is going up and down, and then finger down to what caused that up and down. This is allowing a patient to become autonomous. They can discover what their problem is and what caused it and make adjustments and then report to the doctor on their regular visits. I was recently in Albuquerque at the Museum of the History of Nuclear Energy, and I was just delighted to see a class of students gathered around a discovery learning table about the periodic table of elements. You can see how engaged the kids were learning what the periodic table was, and off in the corner you can see the teacher doesn't even have to be present because the kids are so engaged. Designing for discovery learning is an investment. You must take the time ahead of time. But afterwards, once you've designed it, it will be less work for you, patient by patient. You'll have greater success in the outcomes, and that's productivity. Finally, before you write, you organize material by goals, not topics. Professionals, like all of us are on this call, organize their expertise by topic. That's the way you do it when you're going to get a whole body of material together for being professional. So, obviously, when passing on knowledge, they organize it by topic. You can see here at the American Heart Association description of heart failure, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 chapters, and they're all topics. The way that most patient education proceeds is to define the topic and then to ask about personal goals that might relate to the topic, like take your pills on time. Well, how can you do that personally? The problem with that is that when you're talking about managing a disease, there genuinely are unique goals on how to get control of that particular disease. If we look at heart failure, there are 3 goals that every heart failure patient will have to address. One is lightening the load on the heart. The other is opening up the arteries, keeping them wide and not stiff, and then strengthening the heart. These are 3 goals that every heart patient has. Now, what difference does that make? Are they really that different? Here's the American Heart. On their Chapter 5, Taking Medications, I'll put it to you that is a topic, and then it gathers together all of the medications in one place. I would be willing to bet that very few patients read from top to bottom and absorb and retain all the information that's there about all the different drugs. What we do is to take that same information but organize it by the goals for managing heart failure. You want to lighten the load, so you take water pills. And we discuss water pills, all the diuretics, in the context of why you take a diuretic. And then all the pills for arteries that widen and relax the arteries, that is a second goal. So any information, any encouragement to take one's pills is divided and focused on the goals. That makes a huge difference in the way people approach their medication adherence. Now we're going to begin to write. The first thing I'd like you to see is a rule from advertising that you're going to surprise your people. If you don't capture their attention in the first seconds that they see it, they will move on. They'll drop it in the wastebasket. The only way to do that is to have an unexpected image, words that arouse curiosity, the beginning of a story, or all of the above. Our problem in healthcare is that almost all of our words and our images are very predictable. We did, as a company, a study for the United States Armed Forces because they were having difficulty with people sitting around the bases getting obese. We went out and shadowed the lives of a number of obese soldiers and sailors, and they were all disgusted with the materials they had been given because they all said, Guide to Healthy Eating. And they all said, we know more about healthy eating than any of them. If you look at the images, how often have we all seen in healthcare an image of a person with their arms over their heads? This is a cliche in healthcare. Think about how many logos you know in healthcare that has a person with their arms over their head. When do you do that? Maybe if you just won the girls' soccer team and you put your arms up, you do it, but no one else will do it. It's not something that inspires curiosity. Here are some things that we found from our studies. The people told us, I'm a thin person trapped inside a fat body. So our program is called Getting Down to the Real Me. I also love this book, New York Times bestseller, Younger Next Year. These are things that are unexpected. They arouse curiosity. That's what will get your people to read your material. Then you want to use humor. This is a difficult one in healthcare. We want to be able to laugh. That laughter the best medicine. It overcomes resistance. But it's tricky. The Joint Commission a few years ago, they missed the mark. To inspire patients to ask doctors questions, they concocted a superhero which represented a patient. Unfortunately, the patients felt ridiculed rather than inspired. The Joint Commission has since taken down that program from their website, but somehow they've neglected to take it down. You can still see it on the Spanish version of the website. Superheroes need to obtain more information. Measure the coefficient. Measure your intellectual coefficient of superhero with this online quiz. People do not want to be laughed at. This is not a good thing. Here is an example of some humor which is not directed.
Your pill is a diuretic. It protects your heart. You've heard a human body is mostly water. It's true. The heart pumps the water around just like it pumps blood. When it's all working, the water goes around and out in the bathroom. If the water doesn't come out, you start swelling up. You'll feel it in your fingers and your ankles. It's eating sodium, salty food, that keeps the water in. The load of salty water can get too heavy for a heart to pump. It'd be a good idea to stop eating salt, but almost all food has some salt in it. That's where the water pill comes in. The water pill gets all that water flowing around again and out.
So, this is a way to use humor where the laughter is directed at something else besides the patient themselves. Another one that's extremely important is be concrete, not vague. This is a pitfall of health literacy because when you try to use simple words, it's very tempting and sometimes almost inevitable to wind up with vague words. Here's a story. The father was diagnosed with high cholesterol. He asked the doctor, "What is cholesterol?" And the doctor gave him a tear sheet from the American Heart Association that was labeled that with the purpose of describing cholesterol. The father did not understand it. His son said, "Well, Dad, I've been worried about it myself. Let me go to the doctor." He went to a different doctor and said, "What is cholesterol?" And the doctor said, here's a tear sheet from the American Heart Association. They both could not figure it out. Here is the American Heart Association. They're already doing something we saw from that Yale handout, a question which supposedly is what a patient would ask, but we know a patient would never say, "What are high blood cholesterol and triglycerides?" Next. There we go. The title looks like patient language. It's not. But here's the definition they give. Cholesterol is a soft, fat-like substance. Triglycerides are fat in chemical terms. This is vague language. There's no title on the picture. Ordinarily, you'd expect an image to help clarify. But if you are a health illiterate or a weak literacy patient, what is this picture? There are no components that are labeled. There's an arrow in the middle there toward the bottom, but nothing to explain why there's an arrow there. The caption says, cholesterol travels through the bloodstream by way of lipoprotein. I challenge you that means nothing. The arrow is not explained. We can also find it in WebMD, where if you're trying to understand your medications for diabetes, they have these 6 categories, but 3 of the 6 categories have identical definitions. This is not helpful. This is vague. Here is a brochure from the AHRQ. It says, comparing 2 kinds of blood pressure pills. However, if you go through their brochure, you find things like why treat high blood pressure, what are the benefits, how do they cost, but at no point do they actually tell you what is the difference between an ACE inhibitor and an ARB. It's not there. So what happens, the reason why that I find this quite serious is if you do not tell patients concretely, specifically, what their disease is, what their medicine does, they will concoct their own pseudoscientific explanations, which will always, always lead them to non-compliance. Here's one of my favorite stories, Barbara and the beta blocker. Barbara's doctor prescribed her a beta blocker. What does it block, she asked. It's for your heart, said the doctor. She asked the nurse. It's for your heart, said the nurse. Will it heal my heart? No. Barbara went home and thought it out. It doesn't heal my heart. It must block something. Must be it just masks the pain. I don't need that. I won't take it. We have to build confidence in the person that they can manage their self-care by associating the tasks and the disease with things that are familiar. We want them to go, oh, I get it. Oh, okay, I can do that. Just last month in the New York Times, they had an article about memory, about how to absorbs new material. At this point, I generally talk about the leaders of adult education. I've put their names down here on the slide if you ever want to look them up. Roger Schenck, Malcolm Knowles, Paulo Freire. But this one I enjoyed from the New York Times because they quoted a document written in 80 BC, teaches that the way to remember a new idea is to associate it with something familiar. Let me show you how healthcare generally fails to do this. We have here, I looked up a definition of radiation therapy from 3 famous sources of education material: Cleveland Clinic, Johns Hopkins, Mayo Clinic. Here are their descriptions, the first paragraph of their description about radiation therapy. Radiation therapy is a means of cancer treatment that uses radiation. Meaningless. It's also patronizing, does not promote autonomy. The radiation oncologist will select the type of therapy best for you. This does not promote or even acknowledge shared decision-making. Radiation is a special kind of energy. Big. Radiation through a process of ionization. This is not something familiar. This is jargon. And then the worst thing of all, limiting the radiation to the cancer and not touching the surrounding normal tissue. Can't we really relate this to something familiar? What is radiation therapy? Believe it or not, it's an X-ray. You've always known an X-ray was radiation because you wore a shield and the worker had to stand behind a wall. This is what we want. Relate the unfamiliar to something familiar. Now, this one, let them judge. We all fall into the trap from time to time of saying, it is important fact. It is very important fact. It is important to make sure. There is something built into human nature that when we hear that from an authority figure, it simply arouses our resistance. You can almost hear the shaking finger of that nun. We all know it somewhere in our experience that people are generally persuaded better if they figure it out themselves. So what we want to do last of all in this section is nail it with images. Here we go. Most material that you hand out, whether you make it yourself or get it from some source, like this one is from Pfizer, the illustrations do not actually add information. They are used as decoration, whether it's simply graphics, like on the left-hand side of this page, or little clip art. It's decoration. This is not using imagery to the greatest advantage, and you can even fall into some traps, like this one does, showing a fingernail clipper on a page for diabetic foot care. That leads me to an update on that American Heart Association handout. The complaints about that handout did lead to some revisions. But again, it was merely concentrating on comprehension. What they've wound up with is saying the inside of your artery looks like this. If a health illiterate person can even do this at all, which is questionable, they are still showing cutaway pictures of body parts. What we want to do as education writers is inspire patients to behavior change just like they did at Cedars-Sinai. Something we've done is to say the inside of your artery looks like this. Everyone who sees this goes, ooh, And one man I enjoyed very much when he saw it, he said, I was going to go to McDonald's today on the way home. I think maybe I won't. So this is what we want to do. Nail it with images, not decoration, inspiration. Now, after you're finished, you're welcome to go ahead. In fact, I highly encourage anyone to go to those websites of the CDC and the NIH, look at those 200 rules. They're not bad. They're for comprehension. But you want to be sure that when you do go, you've got the content that you can polish into a gem that inspires. If you take a traditional, ordinary handout that you're accustomed to giving to your patients and try to apply the health literacy comprehension rules, you're probably polishing the wrong rock. And there we are. I hope we have some questions.
First question, have you done any case studies on transitional care kits that lead to the reduction of rehospitalizations?
Oh, absolutely. Oh, my goodness. We've got 20 years worth of them. We have always been able to reduce the rate of readmission by significant percentages. If you're familiar with the standards in manufacturing, you always want to reduce a target by about 15%. If you do better than 15%, you know you're doing really well. We have been able to reduce readmissions by 70% or more. We've been able to do it 73%, 74% in heart failure, which is always a big target. We've always been able to do it in greater than 15%. And our greatest pride is in heart failure. We've also been able to reduce it by over 90% in the infection rate after prostate surgery. One of the stories that goes with that I enjoy the most, at the University of Kentucky in Lexington, we began the program, we reduced the rate of readmission by over 70%, and then all of a sudden it shot back up again. And you can imagine, we were in a panic, the department was in a panic. What happened? We found that the one person in the cardiac department who had been responsible for passing out the kits had gone on vacation, neglecting to appoint someone to pass them out in his absence. So as soon as we got the program up and running again, got the kits distributed again, it all went down back to the 70% reduction. So yes, I have boxes and boxes full of studies, almost wherever you'd want to name. University of Chicago, Cleveland Clinic, University Hospital, all over the country. The U.S. Naval, I believe they've now closed it, but in San Diego, we did a marvelous study there with some wonderful stories. Kaiser Permanente has used our kits for a long time.
Excellent. Could you tell us a little bit more about your path to developing these kits?
Oh, sure. That crazy-sounding PhD that I have, the ethno-linguistics, I believe I stumbled into one of the very first programs where the idea of listening to the end user before you design a product of any sort had been launched at the University of Michigan. And it was a joint program among the engineering school, the art school, and the anthropology department. And we learned about investigating what it is that the user really wants before designing something. And I began applying that in my international work. I I was hired by the Peace Corps to design a program for the retirees who were going into the Peace Corps, and it was my favorite number, I guess, 70% of the retirees were having to drop out of the Peace Corps because they were not able to learn enough of a language in 3 months. So I went in and I listened, and I took a team of 24 anthropologists. We listened, and we redesigned the program. We found that the language teachers were using a grammar book, and the awkward, unnatural conversations that they made people memorize were not, in fact, reflective of what the actual language on the street is. That probably won't surprise you, but that is the way most language classes are taught. We took tape recorders into the most common situations that people face, like in a restaurant, on the street corner, hailing a taxi, all the things you need to know if you're going to live in a new situation. We rewrote the whole thing from the perspective of a person trying to learn the language, and we reduced the rate of failure. This time we'll reverse it. They reverse the rate of failure from over 70% to less than 1%. So when we finished that program, one of my favorite stories was we had a woman 80 years old who was a nurse, and she was assigned to an island where there were no other English-speaking people on the island. And she managed to organize a team of men on the island to build a structure and the equipment that she needed for a rehab facility. Fabulous. So once I'd done that and came back to the U.S., I saw a lot of material working at Baxter about, that was just at the time that the DRGs came in, and the amount of time that you could stay in the hospital dropped from 10 days to 3 or 4 days. And it seemed to me like that was another situation very much like the Peace Corps, very much like the same population of older people trying to learn something new, having difficulty understanding, and I suspected that the things that were being handed to them were just like the Peace Corps language training, much more from the point of view of the teachers wanting to emphasize grammar than from the point of view of the learner who wanted to have practical things they could do on the street. So that's when I started the company, was in 1996. So we're coming up on 23 years now to make patient education from the patient's point of view.
So I believe that is all the questions we have. Thank you so much for sending those in, and thank you to Dr. Aruffo for your time today. And now, for anyone interested in learning about the care kits that Direct Supply offers, please help me welcome our fantastic product manager, Kelly Sullivan.
Hello. Thank you for sticking around for a few extra minutes. I'm going to spend just the next 5 to 10 minutes talking through the contents of care kits, the purpose, some of the applications or benefits that you might find within investing in this portfolio of product. To give you a little backstory as to how this came to Direct Supply, we, on an annual basis, have a clinical leadership conference. In that conference, we host, about 100 plus corporate clinicians here at our Direct Supply campus. And in that conference, we ask them to help us vet out products, give us advice. How does this product fit in? What are some gaps? What keeps you up at night? And it's a wonderful opportunity for us to understand from a clinical perspective what is needed in the building. And a few years ago, we had several clinicians come to us and say, hey, look, we are in our office, stuff in bags, trying to manage inventory. It's very cumbersome in terms of time commitment, and we just really would love to have a kit, and could you pair that with some education, something that we can give to our patients to help them through their recovery time and to ensure safety, ensure that their recovery time is in a way that is managed well, even after we're delivering those on-site services. So we were like, that is a wonderful idea. And we found this wonderful partner, the perfect partner for us in communication science, where they had these wonderful kits built out. I think there was about 46 kits available, and they all are various different conditions that you can tap into. Each kit has really essential needs. We're going to meet the needs of the patient. And what I mean by that is that it's going to have, first of all, clinically vetted devices. So they did take their time to really go in and find the right product. So an example is like a scale. A lot of older adults might have, those analog scales. So what they did is they plugged in a scale into several of their kits that is digital, that is non-skid, that is non-tip, that's easy to read for low vision purposes. And so it's just a better product for this population. And then they've plugged in, as you can see here, several other pieces. They also have plugged in the essential curriculum materials, which we'll go over here in a second as an example. And what they did is make sure that the education was easy to read. It was information that was going to have pictures or imagery that actually matters. It's not just for show. It actually relates to the topic, and that we're establishing goals in not just talking about a topic. So that person can really hone in and really understand what that next step is in that journey of recovery. And then lastly, they've done a really nice job of creating some innovative tools. An example of that is a wheel that they can use for injection site. So when you're trying to rotate injection site, it sometimes can be a little bit, some people forget, or they just don't know when to do it. So they've created a nice tool where you can change it, I think it's once a month, to rotate that injection site as a good reminder for that individual. So they have some really wonderful ideas, wonderful products, and then more importantly, how they really married the education with the product, I think, is essential in its success. For the sake of time, we don't have time to go through 46 different kits today. I'm sure you don't have time either. So we're going to just spend a minute or two here talking through the heart failure kit and just giving you an understanding as to what this all means in terms of what's plugged into this product. So on the table here, I have a smattering of products. These are, again, clinically vetted products that pertain to the recovery of the individual. So there's a purpose behind each and every one of these in managing heart failure, especially when they get home in that transition to home. You can see here too, this card comes with it where it kind of lists out all of the contents, including the education pieces that we'll talk through next. So the first thing I'm going to show you is that it will give you several different education pieces. One being this here, which is going to be the short story, and it has a relatable topic. So here we have a horse, and really what they're trying to do here is help the person understand that, healthy as a horse. Your heart is your horse. It is going to pump blood through. It's going to be strong if you take care of it and if you do the right things to be healthy. So it talks through that storyline and gives some imagery as well to help kind of guide you through that story. And it's really going to help that individual get a grasp on exactly what's happening with them. Then in the folder, it has several components here. I'm just going to open it up. So here we have lighten the load, where we're going to be looking at, put that down just for a moment. Various different options here. So like, what are some ways that I can take salt out of my diet and manage my blood pressure a little bit better, for instance. In this other example here, we have widen the road as the topic. And here we're looking at, again, management of health and diet. So what are some of those pieces in my dietary plan that I should be paying attention to? And then lastly, we have here strengthen the heart, which is going to talk more about exercise and an exercise plan that you can consider to keep yourself strong and healthy. So really kind of covering all bases with that particular folder. They take it a step farther though too. They have all these other tools within the box. So here I have to show a logbook. So the individual can record their day-to-day, their medication, how they're feeling. It's a great way to communicate back to the clinician and help them better understand, okay, from the time that you left to what's going on with you today, I kind of at least have that journal to reflect on as to why something might happen 2 weeks out. They have emergency cards. They have 5 steps to relieve, to be calm. So they give you some guidance as to how to meditate and breathe through anxiety, if that's the issue. They have other resources. How does my heart medication work? How should I take it? What are best practices? Another piece here that I'm going to show is how to take your blood pressure. So here we're giving you a blood pressure cuff, but how do I do that? And, you know, one of the best practices with this type of kit is obviously to maybe give the kit to them or have them purchase the kit prior to them exiting the rehabilitation and educate them on how to utilize the tools in the box so that it's very successful. They go home and they know exactly how to use everything. But let's say, you know, I need a refresher, or maybe the daughter or the son, you know, is helping them. They can read through this as well. Here's another tool that goes nicely on their refrigerator. It gives them the opportunity to put down emergency contacts, just gives them kind of like, you know, a day-to-day reminder, reflection as to how to take care. This is kind of a fun one. This is going to give them guidance on what foods to maybe that are better choices for them at fast food. Because let's be real. I mean, people aren't going to stop going to McDonald's because they had heart failure. If that's a lifelong enjoyment for them, we're not saying don't go to McDonald's anymore, but maybe instead of getting that, you know, quadruple, triple, whatever Mac, maybe this is something else that you could consider that will still allow you to go to what, you know, your favorite fast food place. And then again, another dietary education piece here. Really kind of cornering off. These are good foods for you. Here's all the different categories of foods that you should be considering. So when you're making your grocery list, consider some of these. I know for my own personal self, I do a lot better with health and exercise if someone is telling me to do it. I think we all benefit from that. It's hard for me to get to the gym unless there's an actual class there and I can see other people around me sweating along with me. Well, with food too and diet, it's easier when someone's kind of giving you some guidance into what you should be buying, what types of meals make the most sense for you to be healthy and to take care of yourself. So as I mentioned, there's several more kits. This is the heart failure kit, but would they have kits that, let's say, pertain to COPD? They have kits here always within reach. This is a great one for a ortho patient. And this is probably one of our most popular ones that we sell here at Direct Supply. And as you can see, there's different options for packaging. You can order it in a bag, in a box. There's a mesh bag option as well. And then you can customize. There is an opportunity to customize. So you go after this this webinar, we'll be sending you a follow-up email where we'll have a link to a blog that was created by our partners at Communication Sciences. And there it's going to talk specifically to kind of all of the wonderful outcomes that they've been able to deliver in the last 20 plus years with their program here. And then also give you a link then to all of those kits and what all of those kits, you know, what they all entail. So in that, lastly, I just want to point out you can also put your logo right on the box or on the package itself. When you think about marketability, you're giving a takeaway to an individual to go home with. They just, left your care, let's say a week ago. Now they have some friends over or family over, and they're showing them this kit that they have now that helps them take care of themselves at home. Well, there's your logo, your company's logo right there on the box, so that you're actively promoting yourself as well. So, the likelihood of someone else having a surgery or needing a referral, this is going to help with that referral system as well. So, and all that said, I just wanted you to understand that this is a very holistic program. It's a holistic kit, and there's so many options and choices out there. As I mentioned with the customization of it, it really is up to you to have some flexibility. If there's some opportunity to create your own that makes sense for your programming at your community. And they have a couple other options. Besides just a hard kit here, there's options as well to just purchase the hard copy of the education materials. So maybe that's all you need. You already have this figured out, and what you really want is the education. You can do that as well. They just recently, in the last year or so, came out with an online tool website as well, where you can go on and you'll have access to many, many different education pieces, which you can there print off. It's a subscription, and then it will give you access to the videos. And I know that Sylvia showed one of those videos about how to take your meds properly, or what it does to your body once you take the meds. And they've got a whole library of resources there for you to have access to. So there's 3 different ways that you can really invest or benefit from these care kits. If you have any additional questions, don't hesitate to reach out to your account manager. They can always connect to me or I can connect to Communication Sciences. We'll get your questions answered. In the meantime, I'm going to say have a great day. Thank you for joining us and spending the time with us today. And I hope to see you next time. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Kelly, and thank you to Dr. Aruffo for your time today. If you have any questions, as Kelly said, please email us at webinars@directsupply.com. And for more information about upcoming webinars, please visit directsupply.com/webinars. Once again, thank you for attending today.